Welcome everyone at the next multi-network community sync. Today's May 28th, and I have one topic to kind of talk over what kind of we want to kind of position multi-network in the array. It should be a short one, but I want to get your input, what your thoughts about this one. This is not, I hope, not nothing something revolutionary. It's just to kind of put our stuff in kind of within the array position. I will go over it. We can then talk. And then I want to continue the discussion from last week. I think last week we have been looking at the Mac VLAN on top of VLAN use case. I had a chance to read through the capacity cap and kind of have my thoughts. Maybe we can continue discussion on that one. And if I would kind of as well, I will add updates on my demo. So some small things that I managed to do. Nothing to share yet, but just gonna let you know. All right. So if you have any other items to add, let me copy link. Add yourself to the agenda, and I think the last item is gonna be pretty long. Gonna take probably the rest of the meeting. So if you have something, please add it before that, so we can uh, go over that. Okay, let me go to that presentation. I have two slides about this to kind of talk over. So on this topic, internally, we want to kind of put some systematic approach to what multi-network is. And basically, this is kind of an attempt to do that and how that multi-network relates to the array, how it works within, right? So I think the main thing is this. Let me make a slideshow of this. I'm not sure whether it's that better or not. Let me see here. Yeah. So basically, what I'm thinking, and internally we were thinking of kind of dividing the kind of topic into three main use cases, right? The first use case will be the direct DRA API usages, right? So think your AIML or anyone else, or even not only that, because um, it can be as well multi-network, but without the pod network API, right? Because it doesn't, whatever we are designing here and defining doesn't prevent anyone from using the interface. This is what we discussed last week, right? Or even before on, do I create the devices in resource slice on creation of pod network or not, right? Is the creation of pod network just an add-on, an additional attribute on the resource, or I create? So basically, you can go both ways, and hence, like DRA is the encompassing like of kind of capability that we can have, and encompasses as well the multi-network approach. I think this one is clear. Any questions to that? All right. So the next kind of division, next section will be an approach where we just want to have a centralized configuration for our resources and group them in some ways, right? Um, instead of going over kind of using resources, resource claims, and templates for each workloads that I can have, then I have to create separate ones. I might want to create a pod network with common sets of variables for my networking configurations, and then just reference that pod network to kind of group the commonality of configuration across those, right? We are kind of exploring that kind of approach is to the cases where we don't really need full Kubernetes functionality. And this is where the last section comes into, right? And we want to distinguish that because not every use case for multi-network will be about serviceability, network policies, and all the blows and whistles, right? So that's why we do want to have that kind of middle section where I just want to have a piping to the pod. I think I'm not sure whether Multus, I don't want to kind of diminish, but maybe Multus today, if you don't have it, just grab Multus as is that, right? Where I have a common set of configuration for my interface, and I'm caring about just having an IP and additional interface for my pod. And that's the end of the story, right? So basically, you can think of B as where Multus lies. Maybe I'm not keeping track of what additional features they might build on top of it, but I think from what I remember as the base thing, that's where kind of the B where Multus would fall in. And then last piece will be the fully fledged Kubernetes kind of ecosystem, right? Where we have requirements on pods connecting to the pod network, having connectivity between themselves on that interface. And then that comes with capabilities of being able to define cluster IP services or network policies or any other Kubernetes features we can think of. This is where we want to kind of eventually get to, right? And this is where we're mostly focusing. I think the current focus, what we are trying is to define just a pod network API. So we kind of working on the B section today. But eventually, with the gap that Puja drives, we want to get to the C and enable C as well. But today we are kind of defining just B. Does that sound reasonable on that kind of selection? And maybe I will go over why we are even doing this. And I think this gives us kind of some sort of position within community, right? In the whole Kubernetes community you want to have in mind here, right? So we have different level of complexity for the features, depending on where you want to kind of focus on, you can do that. So it's not like you have to dig deep into multi-network to get engaged with it. You can start with the array and just, all right, enable things there and build things over there. And then pod network can be just an add-on that you don't have too much worry about, right? We do want to kind of, that's something that we decided like a few weeks back, that the array will be the user-facing API, right? So we are not introducing anything user-facing new, whatever the array is. Considering the array is having this now big traction around the community, finger crossed everyone's gonna know how to use it. I think this is where this point comes from as well, where having the big traction and basically being on the kind of hype today, people is gonna start and learn how to kind of use it. So that way means we will not to have to create new user guides for our pod network stuff. So anyone's gonna be familiar with the array will know how to use multi-network as well. As per our kind of last discussion and kind of approach, where we just say we're gonna have the standardized pod network attribute, and you just put the name and you're done, right? And that's kind of familiar on how the array works. Jesper.
So firstly, I just want to say sorry for not being here the last year, but I think another week and I will change my position where I can participate in these meetings again. And I just want to say that I joined this meeting today to say that I'm 100% for this, and I'm super happy to see that we're going all in on the array. I agree with you that it's the way to go, and that's where the community is going. And it would be very hard to come up with another sort of way of doing something when it comes to resource management. So I'm 100% for what you have here. Just wanted to make that clear, since we quite often have had different opinions.
Yeah. I think you might want to catch up as well on. I don't have a doc yet updated with the design.
I've been sort of lurking and following
Okay.
what happens, but this time 11 every day has been
Okay.
impossible for me. But like I said, I should be clear, if not next week, the week after.
All right.
And you will see me all the time.
Yeah, I want to add something on what Per just said, because what I hear in Ericsson is that people are complaining because it's becoming super hard around the array, and we should work on simplifying this. I think this is quite important for people to adopt this solution. Otherwise, we will have something, but nobody will use it at the end. But I agree with you, Per. The point is that we should focus on simplifying things. I think
we need a simple way to evaluate the specifications, right? So you know what you're getting. I don't know if Copilot and things like that will be good at helping with that, but that's the problem, right? It becomes like an ML. You need some way to ML. I can't even talk today. Evaluate what you have and emulate the result of what's in there, because they're fairly hard to just try to parse the specs and know that everything is correct in there.
So that's interesting, Lionel. So basically, you're saying that the array specs, like the claims, are too confusing and too complex.
Well, compared to Multus, you just had to declare. Of course, you have less features, but now they're saying, okay, you have to handle this scheduling part, and then you have to do this configuration part. And altogether, it's become like a super huge object in this resource claim. And I think people are quite confused.
So which side you say is a complex? Is the because let's maybe divide that, because as you know, the previous the previous picture, are you saying the providers? So there are a few sides: the administrator, the user, the app developer, or the provider. Which piece?
Well,
because I think the most concerning for us is the app developer. That one has to be the least, and this is what I think number 2, because it's application developer facing, right? I agree, and that's gonna be, I would say, with any new feature. Oh, now I need to develop something new, and they come up with this sophisticated thing, this and that. I assume every new, and we are used to Multus, and we know how it works, and it's very straightforward, right? There is no rocket science around it.
Yeah.
And here, yes, now I have to deal about the resource slice, how that works, but that's hidden from the user, and maybe there is a difference about maybe in your environment. I'm not sure how that's specificity, right? On you are the consumer of your own stuff, right? And then I need to develop. Then maybe that's your fair. That might be confusing. Is that?
So I mean, the good thing is that if everything is in using the array framework, right, there is one framework to deal with and understand. But I think the sheer mass of specification that you can get in that might need some support to understand what's there. And I mean, humans are not really good at looking at really large configurations. So I think there is a need for tooling and help with checking that what you have is correct. And I think that will be developed. So yeah, the step in is there, but on the other hand, it's the same step in for whatever sort of resource you want, right? I saw today that NVIDIA has a DRA beta now on handling the GPUs instead of using their operator, and they're adding more and more features to it. So it's coming pretty wide, right? So maybe it's just getting used to using it and then a step in like that, and then no one will think about it. But
Lionel, do you? Sorry, Gaurav, I'll get back to you and give me a sec.
I mean, maybe it was just early feedback from the presentation I gave internally, but yeah,
Okay.
or maybe I gave too much details, but yeah, it was early feedback. I guess at some points, yeah, we will have this tooling, we have all the documentation behind and more experience. So, but it was early feedback.
But basically, you're saying the feedback was on everything was complex, right? The implementation, the provider piece, and the user as well, the app developer part.
Well, yeah, you have all this kind of things coming together, and then it's a lot of things to present. So
okay, I see, and that's I am the same as that's why I was pushing back. Like, remember last year we were like, let's abstract that whole thing, right? The whole thing out of it, right? So
yeah.
pod network only, and then just the name, right? That was the kind of initial approach from my side as well. But I think with the examples that we showed, I'm hoping, I'm not sure what you showed for your folks, but with the example that we showed like 2 weeks, right? Where even you can hide your stuff behind a class, then it's very straightforward. The claim is very, there is not much in it, right? I think we're gonna talk about the capacity, which I read into. It was bit that might get things complicated. But beside that, hopefully the base case can be simple. I'm counting on that. Gaurav, go ahead.
I was just trying to add, I think that, yes, I totally agree that there will be an initial steep learning curve, but I think beyond that learning curve, I think after that friction, things would ease out. And at least that is what I feel. And also, I think the problem that we are trying to solve isn't like that straightforward that it can be easily expressed with a very simple API. I mean, obviously, one would like to achieve that eventually. But right now, I think our attempts at like having the simplest interface haven't been able to like cover all use cases, right? Which only goes us to show that perhaps it needs some more verbose like description or something like that. So yes, definitely let's try to have that thing first, and then I think eventually we can try and simplify that. Just some random thoughts.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point, Gaurav. Yeah, and I agree. I think the one big thing is what Per as well was saying. Like everyone's on this, right? And I agree. Initially, everything's a list, everything's an array, and you can have those cells definitions. And it's so like now I need to learn some cell programming. What the heck? And all the kind of what sort of fields can I set or what's not. Okay, so that's all confusing, right? Hopefully, as I mentioned, can be hidden in the classes, some of those things. But yeah, I think I'm not sure. I think the community as a whole is pushing towards it. Like I'm talking Kubernetes community, so maybe it won't be so bad. I think the good part out of this is the we have the ability to define the networking through this, right? And then the NRI kind of exploration kind of helps us a lot with for networking. And then we can find some new alternatives on how to kind of manage the network in pods, right? That gives us that flexibility that kind of we need, right? And but basically this is what the last thing is as well, is the separation of the tracks, right? You can focus on the NRI on the very deep down, just the driver side. You can focus on the controllers for your serviceability stuff, so the endpoint slices, or here whenever we get to that stage. So between the three kind of, I'm referring to those three sections, you can focus on one of the things, right? The array, pod network itself, right, with the simple piping, or more sophisticated Kubernetes features, right, like network policy or something, right? So that's what kind of this approach gives us. What I'm hoping with this is that we position multi-network better within the community. We will get some better traction around it. We will be aligned with the array. With the current approach that we showed that we are thinking of, positions pod network as an add-on, and then provider implements it the way they want it. And yeah, I think in overall it looks kind of at least that looks simplified, and we still can leverage the array to kind of get the referencing, and we are fitting into the resource story, right? As Per mentioned, right? We will be a device because we are, right? So we are not something special like networking. It is usually, but here we are able to generalize that within as a device, and it can be anything, right? What we need. And then we can group it with the pod network and build on top of that. And this is all I had here. Any other comments or questions around this? All right. For folks that just maybe haven't joined, I see some new faces. I recommend doing, because we kind of explored for the last 2 weeks, we have explored a new approach for how we're going to do. And I think I recommend this. I'm sharing the good, right? The notes and this presentation, going through it's some kind of shows option 2 of how we are seeing. I think this is the same. This is similar. We are working on this one for these use cases, but this presentation kind of shows what I'm talking about, what we are kind of currently deciding on. I am about to update the design. It's out of date currently with all that information. I didn't have time to do that yet, and I apologize. There's something that I need to get into. All right. Any other details on that? And other questions around that positioning of multi-network? I hope this is nothing out of ordinary, what we just discussed till now. I hope so. Anything think this is something new, something very strange, or not? Because this is just like putting some sort of picture into how we are going to be, and that's it, right? And basically nothing else changes through what we discussed. One aspect I might bring up was I think Lionel, you were mentioning maybe can we use this with Multus or just skip the whole DRA story? And the question and answer is yes, right? Keep in mind that you can always use the APIs in that manner. I think, but I would like this community focus to be around DRA. And I think that will be our always main focus, and hope we are in agreement in that one, right? All right.
Yeah, sounds fine.
All right, thanks. So moving on, I am keep going with my demo to what we discussed. I don't have much to show yet. I am almost kind of there where I am hacking slashing DRA net. So I have ability. I have added the ability to add additional attribute to a device if a pod network selects it. And then I am trying to get the piping so that the status of the resource claim is updated with the pod network name. I don't have the whole thing working yet fully, so I don't have nothing to show, but I hope next week I will have more to kind of attribute to and show what we kind of have in mind. So finger crossed I will get that sorted out next week. All right. The last piece is the Mac VLAN, and I think the kind of discussion around, I would say, capacity cap. I had it somewhere here. Yeah, if anyone willing to kind of look what I have in mind. So this is the capacity cap that's being open. So there's a lot of discussion around this. And I think what were our kind of work presentation was this guy. Let me maybe show that because stop sharing, share this stuff. So what we are trying to achieve here is the ability of doing something like this in this picture. This is what we kind of the use case that we are trying to model, how we would model in the array to achieve this, right? So I have some parent interface at each one. I want to create a VLAN interface on top of it. And then I want to create a Mac VLAN from that, right? So this is one of the use cases. I'm not sure whether it's a common one. I think it usually saw some common. So we would like to position this in some ways and see what, and basically we're trying to show with the partitioning capability plus the capacity cap on how we would model that, right? One caveat to all this is to ensure that the ETH1 interface can be shared as well. And this is for this kind of use case, right? Where I can do either this or that. So that's one additional caveat to this, is that I want to be flexible, right? If I don't have any VLANs on top of my ETH1 yet created, I should be able to just leverage it as a device type. So basically I will pull the whole thing into the pod at will, right?
So when you say no VLAN, you mean ETH inside the pod, there is no VLAN, or you mean ETH1 as an interface, I mean, connected to a NIC?
No, it's this picture. You can think of it as this picture. What I'm getting at is the VLAN outside, right? Because keep in mind, VLAN 10 and Mac VLAN, those are Linux constructs, right? Standard.
Okay. I just wanted to understand where the VLANs was.
Right, and yeah, and this is what they are. Those are and I'm referring to that. Nothing external.
And it's pure no SRV stuff in here, right?
You can think of this ETH1 to be a VF, and the node being a VM, or not, or can be bare metal. Doesn't matter.
It's more like sort of the visibility of the first VLAN, right? So I mean, if it's SRV, then it's really the NIC that eats it. I mean, it's not.
It can be depending how you
typically
configure
not even
That's
visible to the OS, right? It's terminated down there, and then
It
you
can
just-
be that case as well, Per. But
yeah, exactly.
Uh,
But or it's a normal VLAN, and then you shoot off another interface, right? And you connect to that. So, but double VLAN is pretty common.
yeah,
It's not uncommon.
which parts can you repeat?
That's
Sorry.
have to do VLAN and VLAN. It's not.
No, this is not it. This is not that. No, this is not that. So basically, I would assume this is some sort of ETH1 is a trunk, and basically those are VLAN, and it's not VLAN in VLAN. Yes, I agree with you. This is not that. But I think this is. I don't think that matters much here. It's just between this and the last pictures. What I want to kind of show that indicate that ETH1 can be at will either used for this more virtual and basically as a parent, or if I have another node where I haven't created a pod in this configuration, I can use that interface too for this mode. So basically the modes are interchangeable depending on usage, right? Imagine I have 100 nodes with this ETH1, and my driver, can I achieve with my driver this flexibility, right? Where I create my pod network, which says, okay, I will gonna use a parent or master as ETH1. It will be some mode VLAN with VLAN ID 10, and then I will link to it with via Mac VLAN, right? I think this describes what.
All right. So
what,
okay.
And then this is one pod network blue, and then I can have pod network. Let's say it, not here. And I can have pod network red that says on the other nodes, I want the same interface to be used as a whole, right? I want to pass the whole interface to the, so basically think of it as I am changing the namespace for that whole interface, right? To the pod's namespace.
And no bridge in between.
And no, exactly. So this is the whole thing goes to the pod. That's it.
And so you pass the ownership of that.
Yes, exactly. So that's basically, and I want to have the flexibility to do one or the other, because maybe I am looking at it to see whether it's possible. I think whether we can model it through the array.
So in this example, I mean, basically it should be the full interface, and then you should be able to tag VLANs on top of it, or can it sort of?
So that part, what happens in the pod is,
or is it just an interface?
Just the interface.
Yeah, that's
you
sort
see
of.
This,
okay.
There is no VLAN motion.
Okay,
in this
so
snap.
we think of it as an untagged interface in the Linux host namespace, which of course could be tagged when it attaches to the NIC, right? But okay, fine.
Yeah.
So it's a standard plain Ethernet.
Yeah. So basically, this is of you're right, and that's the thing. The kind of core point here is to have that flexibility. I can either do this or that, right? So I think this is where because what it boils down to is how we define it through the kind of the driver, right? The resource.
So the VLAN 10 here, is that an interface or it's data over a trunked interface? So
we come up with two. What can it be, right? I think one approach was this. Basically, hide VLAN interface.
Is it filter data? So you would say like, oh, from this stream, filter out VLAN 10 and then sort of attach it to Mac VLAN, or is it, oh, someone has created a interface VLAN 10 on top of the base one? I mean, so basically let the hardware do the filtering for you, and then you do Mac VLAN on that, or is it both?
I'm not sure I got the last piece, but
I think so in one way you can say that, okay, it's a tagged interface and you get everything, right? I mean, if someone is using VLAN 100, it comes everything over at ETH1, right? And you get everything. It's basically, like I said, a trunk. And then you would say filter out VLAN 10 traffic out of this amount of data, right? And you could say, if I write to it, add on the tag for VLAN 10, or sort of have someone created a local interface. I mean, basically ETH .10, right?
I think this is I think you're going to details of the kind of VLANing. I don't think this was.
No, it's more, but basically, is it is it basically, if you think of it, is it the filter that you have here over traffic that comes up of ETH1, or is it an interface that's called VLAN 10? That's basically my question.
It's the interface. This is what I said. Those are Linux constructs. So you think of
you
it as
you say master. Okay. Base one. Okay,
Correct.
so it creates an interface for you. Perfect.
Yes.
Fine. Just
So,
want to-
and this is the question, right? Whether the interface, and I think what we come up with two possible approaches for this, where the VLAN
Both are
interface
possible.
is shown in the DRA resource, right? So we had a parent interface called out here, right? And basically, those are shared counters, right? But basically here, our ETH1 has a total value of 4,000 number of VLANs, right? And then it can have basically VLAN 1 device
Okay.
that is going to be a one chunk of it, right?
Yeah, but
I think the key here was to ensure that this is listed, right? And I think with the shareable, the partitioning cap, right? Because this is the other cap that we're looking at. The partitioning cap allows us to kind of do this, right? Chunk the whole thing in specific ways, right?
I see what you want to do. You want to be able to, in the spec inside the pod, select the VLAN. And if that then is how it's implemented by the machine, you don't care about. But you want to be able to say, give me VLAN XYZ, right?
Yeah, exactly. Here.
Okay.
So, and this can be...
Or you could use the same thing for VXLAN in reality. This is just one example of how to do this selection. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly, because this can be, as you just said yourself, exactly.
Okay, and then how I drive that, if I use the eBPF filter, or if I create an interface
exactly
and link up to it, and the interface or a bridge.
So I think it boils down to the kind of notion of how do I block ETH1 usage, right? Because that's, I think this is where the whole clue is. And I think when I'm looking at it is because here we talked last week was that VLAN 10, if we were to have it as a resource, right? And then we provide all the capacity capability to this, right? Where kind of I can have, let's say, the 64K value, and the minimum range is 1, right? Minimum value and maximum value that I can pull out of that kind of capacity is 1. And this is for MAC-VLAN capacity, right? Where how many MAC-VLANs I can have on top of VLAN 10, right? This is for that. But the problem with this approach is that this will hold a lock on the VLAN 10 interface only, not really on ETH1, right? And that's kind of what we talked about, that how do we kind of get that indirect lock on those? Yes, Lionel.
I think this might be a sharing policy mode then that we would need.
What do you mean? Is there something that I'm missing?
No, I mean, I discussed with Peng this morning about that, and I think she added it in one of the Google documents. So the idea is to have a sharing policy mode, and if, for example, nobody use or someone use the capacity in a special condition, for example, none of the capacity is claimed, then it's impossible to claim this capacity anymore for this node, on this node, for this network interface. And I think some kind of similar thing might be needed for shared counter. Then there should be some kind of counter policy that says if this is in use, then nobody else can claim it. Something like this, I guess.
For you talking about the ETH1 at that point?
Yes, the counters might need some kind of policy, policy mode that would need this, but this must be included in the partitionable cap, I guess.
Maybe the question as well will be.
What I discussed this morning. What I discussed this morning was about this consumable capacity. So it's for the like the virtual devices, this sharing policy, but maybe the same thing would be needed for partitionable devices.
To be honest with you, we can as well do this, right? Like considering what I was thinking here. Oh, we can say that the VLAN interface, if I have a what was it? So capacity, this here I defined capacity for this, right? But then if I use interface from this, right? I wonder whether I can as well provide a artificial capacity on ETH1 as well of 64K, right? And then I can kind of hold capacity from both devices when I create the, you see what I'm saying? I don't have to have just one counter, right? For my, and this.
So it's not capacity and counter, it's only one that is consumed then.
No, then I would consume two because I will have a counter on VLAN. I wonder whether that's even possible though. So you see what I'm saying? So basically what I'm thinking is have another, so ETH1 has capacity VLANs and have another capacity. Can I edit? Yeah, I can. So let's say this one have as well VLAN capacity. Mag VLAN. I'm not sure whether that's even possible though. So, but if I were to do that, then this is how I value, and this will be the 64K as well, right? So now I have this ETH1 has two capacities, right? This and that. And basically, whenever I take up this Mac VLAN interface from here, I have to take one of this one as well. And this is how I put the lock on. I'm not sure whether that's even possible. That's kind of strange because it's out. I'm taking a value out of completely different device, right? Probably not possible.
Maciej, can you help me understand, like, given this is the current state that you are in, what is the state that you want to like avoid or not allocate? Basically, I'm saying like, if VLAN 10 is using ETH1 and there's that Mac VLAN configured, like, what
okay,
is
so
trying to avoid or trying to allow after this thing?
So this.
By that.
If I do that on the specific node, right? If I have at least one pod using this model, I should not be able to do this mode.
Okay, so you can, so after you have that model, you should not be able to use the ETH1
as a whole device, right? Right.
So once someone has started using that model, why doesn't the DRA driver simply remove ETH1 from the resource slice? Is that still required?
So from what I'm hearing from John, you should not just update the resource slice at will. It should be very static. Basically, that's the kind of goal of resource slice.
No. So, but how? So I think that is contrary to my understanding. My understanding was that resource slices are updated, and that is how you tell the scheduler which devices are available to you or not. Basically, this is what we want to tell the scheduler, right? That ETH1 by itself is not available for scheduling.
So I don't think you do not remove, if you take up a capacity, you only show that in the, if I'm not mistaken, and maybe someone else can because I don't remember so well the capacity cap. But if I'm not mistaken, the ID, or maybe I'm wrong, because there was this. I think the capacity cap is adding the UID, right, as well, Lionel.
Yes, but how it is done, it's not updating the resource slice. It's like taking all the resource claims that are existing and computing what is in use. So it can keep track of what is being used in the resource slice. So you don't need to update the resource slice all the time.
So basically, it adds the information of reservation is in claims. Is that correct? I think.
Okay,
yes,
so
yes.
This is moving to a new model than what currently exists, because right now
No, that's not true. So resource slice does not have information about what is used. It's what's available only.
Okay.
When you think about this, look at resource slice has no information about what is used. It's only what's available on the node. That's it.
Okay, I maybe have to double check then, because
Yeah.
My understanding was that the scheduler always just looks at the resource slices and nothing else, and it is through resource slices that the scheduler determines which devices are still available or not. So if something is
If you
the resource slice, then this is, I think, the reason why resource slices have like these generations and all that versioning, right? That these we expect resource slices to be updatable with newer devices or devices which no longer exist. But
So
that's
from
maybe
my
why.
initial testing, let's through
Yeah.
DRAnet, if I pull the whole device into, maybe I haven't checked that, but I don't think the resource slide changes if I push it into the device, right? You see what I'm saying? Or maybe I'm wrong. I think when I think about this in DRAnet, when I look at the code, I think it scans all the time things. If I push
Yes.
the device into the pod, that device disappears, right? So you're
Yes.
right. So
Yes.
maybe at that point it sees, okay, that it's not there anymore. Okay,
But
this is
either that model is wrong, or we need again, we can take this up separately. I was
yeah,
just
we can look at it, but maybe that's what you're saying. It's because then I think there's something akin to this, right? In some ways, where
yes,
the
yes.
driver does some special logic because it's a VLAN. So either we just hide that information, what VLAN it needs, right? But then it's tricky, right? Because the claim would have to say that it's a Mac VLAN, right? In some ways, right? Versus it's the full device, right? I think the difference, what I'm heard from the capacity comments, cap comments, is that if I want to use the whole device, I will just put the full capacity of the of that, right? So this would reserve a just a Mac VLAN, but if I took the 64K here, that like this, right? This will take the whole device, right? I think that's the difference. How I differentiate resource claim for a single Mac VLAN versus the whole device, right? Which I think I saw John is pushing back a bit because the shareable flag can change meaning of the device, which it shouldn't. I think there is still discussion around that, so that might change. But I think what you're saying, Gaurav, that might be the case where basically what we are saying here is we put it on a driver side. And to be honest, I just want to, this is not something that we will put in the design for pod network, right? Because this
Yes,
is
yes, yes.
this is out of scope for that, right? I just
Exactly.
want to
Yep.
see can we model it, right? I think
Yep.
this is
Yep. Yep.
where
I
I'm getting
understand that.
coming
Yep.
from, right? And that's a fair point, Gaurav, where it can be so kind of dynamic that, oh, okay, I saw you are using the driver sees, oh, you use some VLAN, or it will just put some sort of notification when it's, oh, someone using VLAN. You know what? I am going to clip this TH1 resource. It's not available anymore to use because I see a VLAN created, right? So that will be this, and that's a fair point. That basically this whole resource slice, how you use it in your driver, is up to you. I think the one aspect to looking at that in that way is keep in mind that resource slice is a per node object. So depending on number of nodes, this is how many API calls you're gonna make and make changes to the resource slice. So be wary of those aspects because I'm always kind of bringing up the scaling concerns here to kind of ensure that we are not killing up the API server.
Absolutely. That's fine.
But that's a fair point that we could basically hide that guy at that point and say, okay, you know what? I have a VLAN that's got used. And then the one problem with this one is that how do I know when to restore it, right? You have to keep track of all the pods on the node that's using that one resource, right? And see whether that's freed up, right? If that's freed up, only then I can use it, right? So you would have to have in your, I think we called out two paths in the DRA driver. One is the piping that basically does the plumbing, and then the other one is the discovery, right? DRA driver discovery, where it looks at the nodes and kind of shows and lists that. And I think the discovery loop will have to look at the claims, unfortunately, as well, to see are there any claims for this resource, or maybe on the data, because it has to know that something is used, right, at the given time, right? So that's kind of tricky to kind of identify what's used or what's not, to ensure that when can I kind of bring this back, right? When the ETH1 can be brought back to kind of be used for the other thing. But I think, yeah,
this will be on the DRS side, right? Because I
yeah,
guess everybody will have the same problem, so there should be some best practice to how to do this kind of thing.
If we go with
Like,
that disappearing interface, I agree. And this is boils down to as well on the kind of notion that how much information is in the slice, right? Let me see at the cap.
yeah,
Quick.
but usually the array you can add and remove these devices in this resource slices, but there should be a way to, the best practice how to remove this device if this device is in use. I guess it should be already written somewhere, I believe.
I mean, there are likely best practices in terms of how you can update the resource and stuff like that, but our use case is more like how do we reestablish that state that we were in, basically, or reconstruct that state after a restart, basically figure out, hey, we removed the device and we still have to keep the device removed and not re-add it to the resource slice. So
yeah,
I'm guessing that may not be standardized.
yeah. So we think of like this pod got deleted, right? This last pod using this VLAN got deleted, right? So basically, I'm returning all the resources. So at this point, I should be able to re-show, rediscover ETH1, right? So to that, if we go that idea, right, where we are hiding the ETH1 resource as a whole and just getting rid of it, I'm not sure whether that's. Keep in mind, if we were to do that, on the other hand, how do you create another VLAN? Because this VLAN interface is of value 1 for that capacity, right? So kind of tricky on how will that work, right? Because suddenly my core counter kind of disappears, and this counter set, right? This is what I'm having, right? This counter set is being used out of this, right? Maybe not. Oh, I see what it is. Shared counters, it's 4,000. So basically we have a shared counter and it's global. And then I'm using one of it here. So I don't care whether it's from that, right? That's a fair point. I think what other thing would be missing is you would have to put somewhere, maybe it's in the name on what VLAN it is too, right? So that's kind of match one to the other. Yes, Masaharu?
I was posted to the Slack for the summary of last week's discussion, and I think we don't have to なんだ、use both of consumable capacity and partial capacity feature. I think consumable capacity feature should be used to do that, because consumable capacity can select a whole device as a host device, and or can select share the device by VLAN. So both cases are supported, I think.
I think what you're saying is we don't have to confuse ourselves with the partitionable piece and just use the capacity for both cases. I think you're right. I think the main problem with is that what you mean, Masaharu?
Yes.
Okay. So, and I think I agree with you, because like with the partitionable cap, what you have to do if you have a shared counter, you have to list all the partitions, right? So you would have to create 4,000 entries for each VLAN, right? And that's kind of annoying. So you would not want to do that. So I think this is where capacity gives you that virtuality. The problem with that one, though, Masaharu, is that imagine, okay, this is what I'm kind of drawing up here, right? You have VLANs, and where was that? Imagine you're gonna have that sharing capacity, right, for both, right, for VLAN and for VLAN and the Mac VLAN. What is missing is the separate object, like the VLAN 10 object, where you can put your network, right? Because we know that Blue Network is connecting through Mac VLAN to VLAN 10, right? And it's a BlueNet, right? But then if I want to do, but what's missing is this capability. I want to have another one, right?
Okay. VLAN 20. Yeah.
Yeah, or
Wait,
20. That's a fair
yeah,
point.
yeah.
And then this is
Okay.
and this is my red again, maybe
Red,
my
okay.
yellow, right? Yellow, right? So basically, I have my yellow network here now, and I have explicit distinction between 20 and 10. If I put everything
Yes.
on one, I am reliant on the pod network information, right? Because yes, I can have a list as we discussed here, right? In this example, right? I can have maybe a
Yes,
list.
that's right. Yeah.
But then if I have a list, what I need to do, my driver has to reach out to the API server to pod network to know, oh, okay, you want pod network blue, what VLAN ID it is, 10. Oh, okay. So basically what it means, your driver has to go to pod network, to the API to capture pod network and to look into it and get the VLAN ID, right? So that's where, with this approach, if we were to have the VLAN as explicit device, what it gives us, we can put additional attribute on that device, right? And that attribute will be exactly this, right? Blue network, yellow network, right? And so on and so forth, right? Or green network, right? Whatever. So basically, this is where this kind of is, we can leverage what we already have. I think that's what I'm getting at. With this approach, this would have to be an array, a list, and then there is no such attribute like a list, right? So something that we will have to go to the array to ask for a list, right? And then they will tell us, can you do the same thing other way, right? And probably they will show us that yes, you can, and then probably we'll end up with this one. So the question here is, do I have to list all the partitionables? Anyone knows? I wonder whether that's like a must or not, right? Because that's the question, right? Do I have to, or maybe the partitionable, I would create them only when I see a pod network for that, right? I think this is where the partitionable will be good, right? I have still capacities for K, but the creation of the specific VLAN will be based on existence of the pod network, right? So I have a no pod network. It wants to have a VLAN 10. Okay, let me create that VLAN 10 item entry with additional parameters on top of it, but with this, right? So maybe that's the workaround, the need to list all the partitionable devices, because I don't think you have to. It just assumed you have to list all those, but we can make it enforce its creation based on existence of the pod network, right? Then this is the mixed mode where we cannot just add a pod network attribute on a thing existing, but then you need to have some sort of pod network gives you the intent. Oh, I expect this VLAN to exist, right? And then, okay, I think that might be some idea. And then to what Gaurav, you were saying, right? Initially, if the VLANs on a specific parent on the node, if they don't use any of the capacity for the capacity cap, then I keep showing the ETH1, right? And as soon as I have at least one from the VLANs, one of the my VLAN capacity taken, okay, I remove that interface from the list. So you cannot just hijack the whole thing into the pod because it's gonna be consumed by something else, right? So that can be I think that will be the kind of solution for this. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So my understanding is resource slice cannot なんだ、modified flexibly. So I think, yeah, so it is simple
Modify
for
what?
modify, so add some devices or remove some devices from resource slices.
No, so no, it is that, right? At least this is what I'm seeing on the DRA net, how that's implemented. I'm looking at that. I'm taking that as a reference. Sorry, and I apologize if that's not. But the DRA net has two loops in it, like go routines. One routine goes and does the discovery piece, and then there is another loop that does the DRA piping. So basically, it does the plumbing of the interface based on what resources given to it when pods created, and then there is separate Go routine that does the discovery, and they are two independent loops, right? Per?
So just one question, really. I assume that you want to have these Mac VLANs or VLANs in reality, call it cluster local. You do not want to route out through this. Basically, there's no default route on them, right? So they can be, in reality, in most cases, then created on the fly, and you will use your ETH0 if you would want to go out.
It can be everything. To be honest with you,
it's more like if you want to route on them, right? Then someone needs to have set up the router and so on. Then it needs to be planned. I understand, but I mean, if you want to do it on the fly, then obviously it would work with some tooling to be able to do this more like a sort of. It's not an overlay, right? I mean, unless you say that a VLAN is an overlay.
It can be it can be all of what you said as well.
Yeah,
I can have a controller in the background that looks, oh, you created pod network, and then there can be another object in the cluster saying, this is my subnet for that object, will be my gateway. There is some other controller that looks at those things.
Someone would have to set up the gateway and the routes in that gateway, right? For sure. I mean, if you have a good network orchestrator, all of that can happen.
Yeah, this is where I'm. Yeah, it is possible. I'm not saying you cannot do that.
No, I'm curious. Sort of, if you saw it more like a dynamic way of create networks without having the network admin involved.
Yeah. That's a fair point. Then, yeah, because IPAM is always the kind of the problem. All right, folks, we're out of time. I have to run as well. Thanks, everyone. And I think we have some answer. I will try to write this down in some ways, this example of what we just discussed, and kind of we can all review that in the doc as well. Thanks, everyone.
Okay, guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.